G'day and welcome to another episode of Tech It Up Crafts. My name's Anthony.
I'm David. This is the first video in our series of a speed painted, fully 3D printed 40k army.
This is going to be a lot of fun. We're going to try out some new techniques and see what we can achieve with a fully 3D printed army. It's a rather expensive hobby to get into, would you agree?
Absolutely.
And yet these armies, not so much.
These, I think maybe 10% less of the cost.
10% of the cost sounds about right. It is more for the paints what it is for the army.
Oh yes.
What are we looking at? Today we're going to show you our test paints. We've got our full armies. Here is my Tyrannid army as voted by the viewers, and
this is the Tau with the first test paint in the middle. That's the one that I chose to do.
Now, why did you choose to do the Tau?
Necrons were my first army. They're very ranged focused, especially in the older editions. And Tau was an army that I could just never beat, even though I thought they looked really, really cool. They just have a lot of guns, and they look cool, and I like them, so. They
have some very cool guns, and the models are beautiful. I know I've always been interested in collecting a Tau army, but could never justify the cost of it. Still can't. But a 3D printed army, I can get behind that. For me, Tyrannids, I mean, I've been a huge fan of bugs ever since Aliens and Starship Troopers. And I mean, these Tyrannids definitely take inspiration from those early movies and for Starship Troopers, the original book. When we got the votes for Tau and Tyrannids, I think it was a pretty easy decision as to who was going to paint what, right?
Oh yeah.
I've already had a lot of fun painting up my test model. So there's my test. Let's have a look at your test.
This is mine.
Yeah.
A little bit smaller.
Yeah, so... okay. So for me, I mean, I'm originally a Blood Angel player and an Eldar player, so bugs are huge step out of my comfort zone. I really have no idea what to put into a good Tyrannid army or what plays well, but for me it's just going to be about painting up the army, having some fun and trying it out. These are 1,000-point armies, and how balanced do you reckon yours is?
I think mine's fairly balanced. I mean, it is mostly range focused, but you'd expect that from Tau.
Very much.
As far as Tau armies go, though, I think there's a fair bit of variety.
And I've gone with a bit of a flyer theme on mine. So I've got a winged Hive Tyrant, and I've got a unit of gargoyles. That sort of forms one full thrust of the army, and then it's Tyrannid warriors, a unit of Genestealers, and some other support units to go in with that. And you've got to have some big bugs, and I mean these guys, they're so derpy looking. I love them. They're just like squat beetles, and I absolutely love them. The Tyrannid army came from Fantasy Cults Miniatures on Patreon. They are a wonderful group over there and have some beautiful 40k models, beautiful fantasy models. No terrain from these guys, it's just miniatures.
And these ones came from, they were found on Cults 3D, and the links will be down below somewhere.
These are the test print models that you're going to be watching today. They are a way for us to check what sort of color scheme we want to do and how quickly that will be able to be done. We are trying to do this as a 24-hour challenge. Now that is not going to be, we will sit down and film this in a 24-hour straight.
We don't have that much time.
No, I don't have that much patience. So this will be what we can get done in a 24-hour time frame, but broken up. That's okay, we'll keep a timer, we'll make sure that this stays within 24 hours. What can we achieve in 24 hours? Now I'm going with speed paint. So mine is going to be try to just get everything covered.
I still haven't decided what I'm going to do. I'll figure it out as we go.
Yeah, but yours is very much more detailed, more highlighting.
Yes, I wanted all the armor plating to look very stuck on.
Right, very animated. Very anime, yeah. These may or may not end up as the final paint schemes. It depends on what we can achieve.
I've got it. My design's not quite final yet. I still wanted to make a few choices, a few other changes to the design. So, I don't know, maybe you'll see something different later on.
Sit back, enjoy the speed paint test models, and we'll be bringing you more videos in the future on this project.
So stay tuned.
I have never painted Tyranids before, so for this 40k speed paint challenge, I'm doing the Tyranids. Painting bugs, well, got to do some research. I'm choosing to go with a purple and green theme. They're very much some of my favorite colors at the moment, so let's use it. My goal here is to use a very small color palette. Didn't quite work out in the end, but it's still fast. The majority of my paints are all Citadel contrast colors for this project. The model has been undercoated first of all with black, then with a top-down white undercoat. That gives you your zenithal highlighting. All of the models actually come from Fantasy Cult miniatures. Apart from the bodies of the Genestealers I'm using in the army, all of these figures for the Tyranid force actually come from Fantasy Cult miniatures. They've got a Patreon, and I'll have the link down in the description below. You can follow them. But I contacted the guys over there to see if they would be okay with me using this army for this particular challenge. Because my goal at the end of this is to auction off this army to raise funds for Anala. You guys know that I do anything I can to help Anala. They're an amazing organization here in Cherrybrook, and they support people with disabilities. So if I can raise some funds by painting up an army and auctioning it off, well, that sounds like a really easy thing that I can do. Something which I'm trying to do with contrast paints is learn how to use them and blend them and what you can actually do to stretch them out a little bit. One of those techniques is to use contrast medium when you've got two different paints that you've used, using a little bit of the medium and just painting that over those two paints. You will help to actually reactivate them and reblend them. Now don't forget that contrast paints will reactivate after a fairly extended length of time, but that contrast medium will certainly help. I am very much enjoying contrast paints. They're so simple to use. I do think you need to remember that they're a starting point. I wouldn't use contrast paints as a be-all, end-all if I'm trying to paint a Golden Demon standard painting competition. If I'm painting something quick and simple to get on the table, great. These things are amazing. And I have finished, and when I say finished, I mean like playable on the table, finished so many more models using contrast paints than what I have ever finished using conventional standards. So no matter how many times people will always say, oh, contrast paints they're lazy. It's like, no, I am extremely time poor. Contrast paints have actually enabled me to triple, quadruple. The number of models I have been able to finish is incredible, but they are just a starting point. You can do so much more with them, and that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to learn how I can really extend what contrast paints can do. There's a broad range of paints that I've used here, but primarily they're contrast paints. I haven't tried Army Painter Speed paints nor the new Vallejo Express paints, but if either of those companies would like to send me a sample, I'm more than happy to try them out. But as I've got the entire range of the G-Dub contrast paints, I reckon I'll be sticking with them for the moment. But hey, convince me otherwise. I dare you. This test model is coming along very nicely. The main colors of that purple and the green really give it a very alien looking feel. I love how the little splashes of yellow on the gun, and I've used two different yellows there, one for the projectile part of the weapon and one for what looks to be an eye. It really just makes that weapon pop. So I'll be using little splashes of color on all of the models, but primarily that purple and green, that's my color base. I've really enjoyed painting this figure, and as I said before, never really painted Tyranids, so this has been a learning curve. If you don't want to miss the next installments of this 40k challenge, make sure that you hit that subscribe button. Also, leave me a like. That'd be really nice of you to do that. And a comment. Hey, look, I'd love to see what you think about my choice of color for bugs. If you can think of a better color for bugs, bug me with a comment. Still coming in this series, David and I will be doing a playtest of 40k because he and I are both very rusty on these rules. And I have really not played very much in 8th edition, let alone 9th, and please don't get me started on the fact that 10th is now already announced. I think that's ridiculous, perhaps it's time for the community to have a discussion about open gaming license, just like what happened with Wizards of the Coast. Just saying. We'll also be doing our full tutorial on painting the armies and what we were able to achieve in a 24-hour time frame. If you are enjoying this series, what you can do is jump over to Patreon at patreon.com/techadeptcrafts and become the newest member over there on our Patreon. Your support will mean that we can continue projects like this in the future, but also to continue to support Anala, the disability service provider here in Cherrybrook that I do a lot of work to support. To my patrons, you guys know I love you, and I really cannot do this without your encouragement and your support every month. So thank you very much, all of you. You are legendary. And that's it for the test paint. So stay tuned, and in a moment you'll see David's Tau test paint model.
Having already painted a few armies in the past, such as for 40k, and there's a few other systems in there as well, I wanted to try something a little bit new. Tau is an army that I've wanted to paint for a little while now. It looks very cool, it's very anime, I love like their clean armor paneling and everything. It's all very uniform, very neat. In terms of color scheme, I really wanted to challenge myself here. A lot of the armies that I've done in the past have had very similar themes, usually a lot of red in them. There's a lot of very similar techniques being used, all sorts of things like that. So for this, for an extra bit of challenge, I wanted to create a color scheme that used pink as its primary color. So you can see here I'm applying a base coat of a darker maroon color. For the pink primary color, this is meant to give a nice bit of a darker base that you can put highlights over, which is a skill that I really want to try and test and develop in this painting challenge. However, pink is not a color that will necessarily work well on its own, but it doesn't necessarily mesh well with others so well. Now, I didn't want to just do pink with black and white and other shades of grey like that. I feel like that would be a bit of a cop-out, since those kinds of colors tend to work well with pretty much anything. So when I was looking for a secondary color, I checked through some examples and it suggested some greens, some blues. I didn't want it to look too much like candy, so I didn't really go with those, along more of the brighter pastel colors. So what I ended up settling on as a secondary color, you can see here, is an orangey color. So I've gone and got myself a bunch of base colored paints to do for that, and then 2 highlights for each of those. I still have 4 colors for the grayscale, which I'm using for the weaponry and the fabric, and then some white highlights inside there. Just a quick aside here, I'm really sorry about all the camera quality, some shadows. I'm very new to this process, this is a new camera as well, so there's still a few things we need to fine tune and just double check when I'm filming especially. So hopefully in the future, when I'm doing similar things like this, and for the rest of the painting challenge, the camera work and the quality of the video should hopefully be significantly better. A lot of the rest of this video, apart from just doing the base colors, which I've already done at the beginning, where I do the maroon, the blacks, the white, and the orange base coats, a lot of the rest of it right after that is just a whole lot of touch-ups. That's what you're seeing right now, where I'm going over parts that I didn't quite paint correctly. I'm adding extra details, such as the emblem on the end of the gun right there, and a whole lot of things that just maybe have slipped my notice when I did the base colors in the first round. Aha, and finally on to highlighting. Now, highlighting is not something I've done a whole lot of in the past. Most other instances when I've done highlighting has been on a vehicle. Pretty much anything with much larger panels or plate-like structures that I can highlight very easily.
or very small things that only require a tiny dab of a highlight. Basically what it means is I don't have a whole lot of experience doing highlighting for models such as this, which is why I've designed this sort of a color scheme to work with. Now, it is a test paint. There are a few things that I've done that I don't really want to do again, things that I haven't liked, such as doing dry brushing on the legs and some of the other armor panels. At first, I didn't really like how the dark maroon looked. I thought it was too dark, and I tried to make it a little bit lighter by doing the dry brush. I think that was a step in the wrong direction. It mostly just came out looking messy on most of the parts, such as the back and the legs, even if it came out alright in other parts. In the future, what I'll just do is do some extra layers of brighter highlights. If that still doesn't work, maybe I'll think of something else and redo those panels later. Especially with a lot of these highlights having bled over into other lines or not being exactly as clear as I would want them to be. My inspiration for this color scheme was actually one of the Tau armies of one of the kids at Club. They came to Clash last year with a very dark color scheme that had a few very bright edges on their color panels. It came across looking very neon, and I wanted to do a color scheme that kind of emulated that. It was going to be a bit different because it wasn't going to be using black as a primary color. However, I did want to have a sort of very bright and very clean edge feel to the armor plating. I'm not sure if I'm going to still stick with that because I do want to keep the pink as a primary bright color, so I'm going to have to do a bit of trade-off between the dark center for the maroon panels and the pink highlights, or maybe just pink as the base color and then some washes later on. I might do another test paint. We'll see. Again, just so sorry for this camera quality. Our current theory is that the autofocus was turned off, which should be fixed for next time. One thing that you might have noticed that is different from my test paint compared to my dad's is the fact that I have a color palette right in front of me with the paint still on there. And yes, I am still using the standard Citadel paints. Compared to the contrast paints, which in my opinion work extremely well for organic sort of paint schemes and things like that where you can use the zenithal highlighting and get nice blended colors, I don't really want that kind of effect on the Tau here. I like their clean look, which does mean that this test paint took me many hours, and I'm not exactly looking forward to the rest of the army. But there we go, there's the finished product in its glory. I think it could still be a bit better, but it is a test paint after all, and I do quite like the color scheme. Well, I hope you enjoyed. I'll hope to finish the rest of the army soon, and I'll see you later.
Don't forget, hit like, hit subscribe, and leave a comment at the bottom as to what you think so far of our little army project. Until next time, keep hobbying. Here we are with Dad and Dave. No.
No.